Hello and welcome back to the Birdcage. I'm recording this. It is February 26th at almost 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. It is Wednesday, the night of Creighton versus DePaul. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I have a pretty big podcast today to talk about because I have not had the most free time in the world. The last time I came to you with a Creighton episode was 10 days ago. So we are back. We are filming an episode talking about the Blue Jays. I will have a Kansas video out pretty soon. I want to get back to doing game preview, game recaps, but it has just been pretty chaotic. So this is what we have for today. Maybe I can get a video in the next few days previewing Xavier because that's going to be a huge matchup for the Jays later off. But let's talk about some Blue Jay basketball. It has been a roller coaster last few weeks. Creighton went on this incredible conference run, winning 9 straight games. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it was 9. Now I'm going to have to go check. When was our last loss? It was to Marquette. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Lost to Connecticut. 9 straight conference wins. Creighton had an opportunity to take the number 1 spot in the conference away from the Johnnies this year, and that unfortunately has not happened yet. Let's recap. We'll start with that St. John's game because Creighton had an opportunity to do it there after they fell to UConn a few days earlier. That St. John's game, I'm not going to talk about it a whole bunch. It's old news, but it's important that we discuss it. It was a very tough game to be Creighton because I felt like that game was poorly officiated the way Creighton plays basketball. The way Rick Pitino plays basketball is the referees weren't going to call everything. So you go out there, you play aggressive, they'll pick and choose what they want to call. And it worked. It worked. For Rick Pitino, for St. John's, the way that they defended that game worked. Creighton fouled a ton, and Creighton's a team that doesn't foul. They're a team that Ryan Kolkbrenner has never fouled out, and I think he only had a few, but he was like a big part of that game. I don't want to stumble over my words, but I remember seeing something like Creighton has never fouled more than 20 times in a basketball game in regulation since the Kolkbrenner era for a long time. There's truth to that. This is a Creighton team that doesn't foul. They average 10, probably 12, 11 after the St. John's game. They average around 10, 11 points or 10, 11 fouls a game. It's a Creighton team that doesn't foul. And so to have a game such with a lot of unique, different aspects, you felt, if you're a Creighton fan, you felt like that game was poorly officiated just because of the way that it seemed like Ashworth was getting hacked a lot. It seemed like Kolkbrenner was getting hacked a lot. It seemed like St. John's would just come down and dig and dig. And this is not really a basketball motion. That's typically where you get some foul calls, but it didn't happen. It did not happen. And that was it was a tough game. Stephen Ashworth missed a few front ends of free throws. Creighton had a few really good open looks that just didn't go down. Regardless of whether you thought that game was poorly officiated or not, Creighton, at the end of it, still had a chance to get a win. And that's not how it panned out. I think St. John's is a really darn good basketball team. And later, I'm going to come out with an episode, just like a bracketology episode. Not really Creighton, not really Kansas, just basketball. And we'll talk basketball, and I'll give you guys my opinions on the whole matter. But it'll be fun. I'm excited for March Madness. I'm excited. I have a big old class project where I'm going to kind of do an Instagram account for the entire tournament, and I'm really excited. And there's going to be a lot of time even after where I have to post, where I'm just going to be posting basketball content, wrapping up, looking at the season, and I'm really excited. It's going to be pretty fun. But let's talk about the game that just took place. Creighton got a 1-week break after St. John's to rest and recover. And then they were back at the CHI Health Center taking on Georgetown. And a game at the beginning looked a little bit scary. At the end, Creighton got an 80-69 11-point victory against Georgetown, where they pulled up in some gorgeous retro jerseys that reminded me a lot of Nebraska's from a year ago. Creighton did it better than they did. The white and the blue, it was perfect. And I would buy that with my own money if I had a lot of money to spend, willing to spend. Those jerseys were gorgeous. It looked really good on the court. It looked really good before. At first, I was kind of doubting it. I was like, how good are these new jerseys going to be? And they were perfect. Very happy with the way that those came out. Those looked great on the court. And it's nice knowing that we got a big win in the good looking jerseys. Georgetown started off really hot, specifically Micah Peavy. He had one heck of a game. He really did. It was a special game for Peavy. It was a special game for even Jaden Epps. But Peavy, he finished the game with 20 points, 12 rebounds. Nice little double-double for him. But he was 3 for 3 from behind the arc, I think before the under 16. Or the under 12, under 16. It was one of those early timeouts. So you're sitting there and you're like, this could just be one of those games where he pulls a Liam McNeely and keeps them in this thing. And they did a really good job of doing that. In the first half, Georgetown got up by 10 at one point. It was double digits. The Bluejays down double digits at home. Kalkbrenner, Ashworth weren't really getting anything easy. And it was one of those games where you're like, we got to start hitting shots. Reminded me a lot of Seton Hall at home before Creighton kind of busted the doors down and got a good win there. That's what this game was reminding me of. But the one X factor in that game was Jason Green. And he has been an X factor almost all season now. This is one of those things where his first half of the year, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, it's not his greatest game by any means, but he's really been on just a roll for the Blue Jays. He had 7 of the first 9 Creighton points. He had a corner 3. He had a dunk or a layup early, and then he had like a post fade. So he was doing a lot of good things, and he hasn't had a necessarily special season, but I'm going to read off some stats to you. He had 2 games before Marquette where he scored 8. He has scored 8 or more points. 2. Those came against UNLV where he had 12. And then he had 8 against Villanova at home. Now let me read you these. Since Marquette, he had 8 points against Marquette, 9 points against UConn, 10 against St. John's, and 14 against Georgetown. He's feeling more comfortable by a really good margin. He's flowing in the offense. He's fitting in. He's doing the dirty stuff, doing the little stuff that you just need on the court. You can't take him off the court right now. And if you're a basketball player, that's got to be one of the greatest things you can hear. Is just somebody saying, you're so important to the team, we can't take you off the floor. Because that's Jason Green right now. He is having a terrific second half of this season, and I hope that can continue into tonight. I'm excited to watch the Blue Jays play some basketball. I always like getting up, getting ready for those big games. This is a big game. We'll talk about it later. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's focus back on Georgetown. Ryan Kalkbrenner did Ryan Kalkbrenner things. 19, 8, 4 blocks. He had Micah Peavy, I think, tried to poster him twice. No, you can't poster the future defensive player, the 3-time defensive player of the year, and the future 4th-time defensive player of the year. That's not how it works. Stephen Ashworth finished with a team-high 20. Jemiah Neal, one assist away from a triple-double. Earlier in the year, he struggled. He struggled finding his rhythm. But wow, he is special. He is a special player. I would cut off my left pinky to watch another year of Jemiah Neal in this Creighton offense. Jackson McAndrews had a few games where he struggled, but he finished with 8 rebounds, 3 points. He's not shooting the ball necessarily the greatest, but he's a shooter. He really is, and teams respect Jackson McAndrews' ability to knock down shots. And I really enjoy seeing him go out there with confidence to stroke that thing when he is open. because he can. He can shoot the lights out of the basketball. Isaac Trout, 3 of 6. He finished with 8 points. He picked up some personal fouls that game, which were just a little tough. He wasn't able to stay on the floor a whole bunch. He only had 13 minutes because he did have 3 fouls in those 13 in some limited time. But he did some good things. Fedor Zugic didn't play a whole bunch. He had 3 points, huge made 3-pointer, and then he also grabbed 3 boards. So it was a pretty good, well-rounded Creighton team win, especially after the slow start from the Blue Jays. We are now 4 games away of Creighton basketball being the regular season being wrapped up. And sadly, I think Greg McDermott will not get the Coach of the Year award. Here's my thought about that is Greg McDermott has had so many of these seasons now where he is just overperformed expectations. If you want to talk about this year, another year I remember is the year after McDermott. I think he overperformed expectations the year it was Ryan Hawkins' year, and we had all those small guys. It was one of those things where he did it again. He did it again, and it's fun to watch because we don't know how many more years we're going to get of Greg McDermott, and this has just been a masterclass of the season. Regardless if Creighton loses out every single game, this has just been another performance, another example of how great of a coach Greg McDermott is. We lose Pop Isaacs not even halfway through the year, probably a fourth of the way into the year. Game 9, I want to say, after his Creighton performance, after Pop put up insane numbers against my alma mater. It was one of those games where you felt the tide was turning. Creighton picks up another win against the number 1 team in the country, even though I feel like most Kansas fans at that time understood that Kansas probably wasn't the number 1 team in the country, but they haven't lost yet. So you pick up a huge win. The momentum is flying. You just get done with a bad stretch of injury news where you lose Kalkbrenner for a game. Ashworth rolls up his ankle against Nebraska, has to get yanked out of that one, and then miss A&M. So you're just like, this has just been tough news, tough sledding for the Blue Jays. They pick up a huge win, and then boom, Pop goes down. Comes out that he's going to have surgery and miss the rest of the year. And I remember exactly where I was when I heard that news. I was reffing little kid basketball here at Lawrence at the at one of the Lawrence sites for that. And I saw that on my news or on my phone during halftime, and I was sad because the Blue Jays played later that day against UNLV. I was excited to get off work, watch the Jays, and you get that news, and you're just like, "Wow, is the season over?" That was genuinely my first thought: was hang it up. We had some good moments. Being number 1 Kansas was probably up there, but it was one of those where it's just like, I don't know if this team can do it. They were 3-5 before that Kansas game. So they're sitting at 6-3 with a loss to Nebraska, a loss to San Diego State, and a loss to Texas A&M. And you're just like, oh, man, are you serious? Is this how it's really going to go down? And then Greg McDermott just does the typical Greg McDermott things and finds a way to make it work. Brian Kalkbrenner started playing like the potential Big East Player of the Year. Stephen Ashworth stepped his game another level. Jemiah Neal had to quickly figure out his role in the offense, and man, did he do that. Isaac Trout had to step up. Fedor was cleared. Jason Green stepped up. He figured out a way to make it work. And it's a masterclass, and I'm really upset that he's not going to win Big East Coach of the Year this year. It's going to probably go to Pitino because his team's just had such a great season. Tip your cap to them. They beat us. They beat some really good competition in the Big East. But man, this just kind of stinks for Greg McDermott. He has had a phenomenal year. Coaching, especially where expectations for Blue Jays fans were after the Pop Isaacs injury. You're just sitting there and you're like, wow, he's done a terrific job. Now let's flip it over and let's talk about Ryan Kolkbrenner for a little bit, because Ryan Kolkbrenner, I would say, is comfortably the second greatest Blue Jay of all time. If not number two, he's at least in your top three. He's been terrific. He's been terrific. And barring anything crazy, I think this is going to be a year where Ryan Kolkbrenner wins his fourth Defensive Player of the Year. There was Stevie Mitchell talks earlier in the year. Micah Peavy's one heck of a defender. Zuby Ejiofor, RJ Lewis, but nobody does it like Ryan Kolkbrenner. And when I see people on Twitter argue that Kolkbrenner's just tall, he's not the best defender in the league. He just puts his hands up. It's laughable because Ryan Kolkbrenner does so many things that you can't see on a scorer's sheet. I was listening to Creighton's podcast the other day, actually last night. I was trying to sleep with, he did a little thing on X, on a little X space, and he was talking about it, and he brought on a guest, and I can't really remember the guest's name off the top of my head, but he mentioned altering shots. Zuby Ejiofor alters the most shots in college basketball. And he was like, how do you tell that? What statistic proves that? Because how can you judge what's an altered shot? And he brought up the fact that Creighton, if they get beat off the dribble, will funnel them into Kolkbrenner. They'll get their 2 feet in the paint, and they pass it out or they dribble it out because they don't want any business with Ryan Kolkbrenner. And that alone, that's the reason why he's the Defensive Player of the Year. He strikes fear in every offense he plays, and you can call him all the names you want. You can say he's just tall, but your team's afraid to go up and get 2 points over him. And that is the exact reason why he's the Defensive Player of the Year. Not only is he the Defensive Player of the Year, he is the Player of the Year. Ryan Kolkbrenner is the best player in the Big East this year. And so many people are mad that this is the take, that this is people's opinions, because St. John's is at the top of the conference for the first time since Creighton's joined. This is the first year they've been relevant. I guess second year they've been relevant since the Blue Jays have joined the conference. And for some reason, they love to think that they're better than Creighton. And after what year did we join? 2014. It's now been 11 years. They have been the DePauls of the world for 9 of them. They have been at the rock bottom of the Big East. It was an easy win, an easy chalk it up win for the Creighton Blue Jays. That's what St. John's has been the past 9 years. And it's kind of funny they're all coming out of hiding now to claim RJ Lewis is better than Kolkbrenner and deserves the Player of the Year. I've watched RJ Lewis play thousands of times. Not thousands. There haven't even been 1,000 games for St. John's this year, but I've watched a majority of St. John's games. St. John's is really, really good. RJ Lewis is really, really good. He's not better than Ryan Kolkbrenner. Ryan Kolkbrenner averages more blocks than he does blocks and steals. Kolkbrenner averages more points. He shoots a higher percentage from behind the arc. Shoots a way higher percentage from the field. He impacts the game more than RJ Lewis does. And that's the truth. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that race turns up, if the Big East will let Ryan Kolkbrenner get both of them or not. Because realistically, I feel like the only way he doesn't win Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year is if the Big East Conference decides we can't let that happen. Because he is the Player of the Year and the Defensive Player of the Year, and it's really not that much of an argument. I can't seem to go on Twitter without seeing people complain about RJ Lewis not being the favorite to win Big East Player of the Year, saying, but they're at the top of the conference. Give it to the best player on the best team. That's not the award. That is not the award. If that was the award, they would call it the LeBron James Award. Let's find the best player on the best team in the conference. Or let's put it like, that's not how it works, right? Because if that was the case, a UConn player would have won it last year. So many examples of this. Chris Dunn won Big East Player of the Year, and Providence, I think, finished 4th that year. There have been years where Brunson won it and Villanova wasn't the top team in the conference. Like, there's been so many examples of the best player in the conference not being on the best team because that's not the award. They would call it something completely different if that was the award, but it's not. It's who's the best player in the conference. And the best player in the conference is Ryan Colkbrenner. And if you still disagree, argue with the wall because there's not much of an argument for RJ Lewis except his team is better. Let's move on now. I have on my sheet as Creighton locked up the number 2 seed in the Big East tournament. Obviously, theoretically, there's still a chance Creighton can hang a banner. They would need a lot of help probably tonight from Butler and a lot of help from Marquette, and then the Bluejays would have to win out. Do I necessarily see that being a possibility? Of course it can happen. It can happen, but I think this St. John's team's dynamite. I don't necessarily see a real world where they can do that. So let's focus on these bottom 3 teams. Or the other top 4 teams. If I say bottom 3, that sounds like they're bad. The Creighton Bluejays are 12-4 in conference. And let me read you off their next few games, and we'll kind of go over this a little bit. Tonight they play DePaul. They play host to DePaul. We'll talk about DePaul later. Let me tell you, Creighton usually wins those matchups. They've won 21 straight against DePaul. I think that continues tonight. Then they have their most challenging game left when they take on Xavier on Saturday. That game is going to be tough. It really will be. That's a Xavier team that has not had the type of season people really expected from them. I know I thought Xavier was going to be a pretty great team this year, and they're kind of middle of the pack. That's going to be a challenging game just because it's on the road. This was a home game. I feel very confident Creighton can get a win, but we'll have to wait and see. Seton Hall comes to Omaha to take on Creighton. I think Seton Hall's been currently are tied with DePaul for being the worst team in the Big East, and that's a team that's been pretty darn good over the past 5 years. So I think Creighton can get a win there, hopefully, and then they host Butler. So I think it is very likely Creighton can go 4-0 or even 3-1 in that stretch. Hopefully not 3-2 or hopefully not 2-2. I think that's important that Creighton at least goes 3-1. I really see there's really no acceptable way to turn on the year if Creighton goes 2-2. Like, how do you turn that into a positive? How do you spin that into a positive thing? Because I think DePaul, Seton Hall should be 2 easy wins. If you drop the home game against Butler, who's not been necessarily very good, I feel like that just shows that Omaha on senior night's just not that tough of a place to play, and that's not the truth. That needs to be a game where Creighton wins, and then Xavier can be a toss-up. That can be a toss-up because I think necessarily the chances of St. John's having 2 straight or having 2 of 3 losses throughout their remaining stretch in the Big East, I don't think that's very likely. It would be nice to go 4-0. I want the Jays to go 4-0. But if I'm just being honest, I think 3-1's a lot more likely. And then we take a look at Marquette, who has the toughest. I don't even know what I was trying to say. They have the toughest stretch left. They go to Georgetown. Tough place to play. Then they go to UConn. Tough place to play. Then they host St. John's. Wow. I would not want to be Marquette right now because you're looking at this 3-game stretch and there are really no gimmies. I think Ed Cooley's team is, even though they're hurt, I think they're well coached. I think they play really hard, and I think they're going to give Marquette a low run for their money. And then you're talking about UConn and St. John's, 2 of the top 4 teams in the country. 2 of the top 4 teams in the conference. So you're sitting there and a lot of possibilities. There's a world where Marquette loses all 3 of these, finishes the year 12-8, which would probably put them in a position for 4th or 5th in the conference. Be interesting to see how that shakes up. And then UConn, 10-6 so far this year. They've struggled a few times, but they have a pretty favorable stretch too. Their toughest game is versus Marquette, who has just an absolute barn burner schedule. UConn will host Georgetown. They will go to Providence, host Marquette, and host Seton Hall. So I feel like they have a pretty decently easy stretch. They have a tough middle at Providence and versus Marquette. Obviously, anything can happen, but I think that's a pretty darn easy schedule. Let's go over some predictions here. I don't think St. John's wins at Marquette. So I think they're going to finish up 17-3. I'm going to put that right here on my thing. I think Marquette or St. John's finishes 17-3. I think they find a way to get past Butler and then Seton Hall. I think Creighton goes 3-1. I think the Bluejays go 3-1. I think they sadly drop the at Xavier game, or hopefully not, but I think they could, which would make their season schedule 15-5. And then I think Marquette drops two of them. I think they win the Georgetown game, but I think they lose, or I think they win St. John's. Well, let's see. What do I think now? You know what? I'm going to go with it. I think they go 1-2. I think they lose both road games to Georgetown and UConn, which would make them 13-7. Their best case scenario then would be 14-6. We'll leave that there. And then we have UConn, who I think has a pretty favorable schedule as well. I think UConn can go 4-0 in this stretch, and I think they will. I think they're going to finish up 14-6 as well. So, yeah, hypothetically, the Jays would have sixth place wrapped up. Or not sixth place, second place wrapped up. Now, do I necessarily think this will all happen? It could. It could. But UConn's not been the most, how do you say this? They have not won the most games. They haven't been very consistent. Let's put it that way. All season, they have been pretty inconsistent. And there's a real possibility they can go 2-2 here in this stretch at Providence and then versus Marquette, which could happen. But overall, sadly, I feel like Creighton let a banner slip away this year. I feel like this was an opportunity to win the Big East. But I think Creighton can do something special in the Big East tournament. We'll have to see how everything lays up. Because really, it's about matchups. That's what this entire thing's about. It's about matchups. I'm interested to see how it goes. I think there's a real world where Creighton can get a win in the Big East or in the Big East tournament. There's a world, if we get a little help from Butler tonight, where the Creighton Bluejays can hang a banner still. So let's not throw away all of our hopes, but that's just kind of how it's looking. Let's take a right turn now and talk about Creighton DePaul tonight. That game is at 8 p.m. on Fox, on something. It might be on Peacock. See, I shouldn't say things and then not know. Now I have to look it up. Let's go. Creighton versus DePaul. They don't even want to show me. Okay, that game, 8 p.m. tonight. It is on Peacock. Gotta have Peacock to watch that game. I don't even know if it's illegally streamed anywhere. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that. But it'll be a game where hopefully the Blue Jays can take some time to get rested. Because I don't think this is going to be too much of a game, fingers crossed. Creighton has won the last 21 matchups against DePaul dating back to Christmas Eve of 2015. I know I had a crappy Christmas that year. What was I, 11? I must have had a crappy Christmas on my 11th. When I was 11 years old, that was a bad Christmas. DePaul's not a very good team. New head coach Chris Holtman, they're 2-15 this year. This isn't a game I'm necessarily worried about, but it's not a game you want to take possessions off and rest and relax. This is going to be a great opportunity for Jason Green to continue to get better, for Isaac Trout, Jackson McAndrew to find his stroke a little bit. Jemiah Neal, it'll be a good game to see Neal have a great game. I want to see Fred King play a lot. I want Ryan Kalkbrenner to go in. We'll keep the boat afloat. But then I want to see Fred King get in. I want to see Shane Thomas get in. Fedor. I want Fedor to play a lot of minutes tonight. I should have started with him. I need to see Fred King, Fedor, McAndrew, Trout, Green. I need to see those guys get ready, get right. It would be nice to see Mason Miller come in and play really good minutes. He struggled to see the floor recently. Hasn't been his season. Obviously, his future's kind of up in the air right now. A lot of people are saying we shouldn't play Mason Miller. He's had some promising moments this season, but realistically, if he's struggled to shoot the basketball this year, so I'm hoping he can get right. This would be one heck of a breakout game. Have a key contributor, a key piece right before the Big East tournament. I'd love nothing more. But this could be a game where Creighton gets a big win. I think the Jays do win by a comfortable margin, 15 or 20. I'm going to go 85-65. Blue Jays win by 20 at home against DePaul. Now, before we hang it up, let's talk about the future of the Creighton Blue Jays, because it's going to look a lot different next year. Stephen Ashworth, our second best player and one of our better leaders on this team, is gone. He leaves. He had 2 phenomenal years at Creighton. He had last year, it took him a little bit of time to get going, but then this year he has just been a stud, potential first team All Big East level player. That's just how good Stephen Ashworth is. Jemiah Neal, took him a while to get going. It really, really did. But he has been an X factor for the Creighton Blue Jays ever since that Pop injury. I feel like Jemiah just didn't want to overstep boundaries. And I feel like losing Pop, though it sucks and though I think this team would be much better with him, helped Jemiah discover his identity, which I feel like come the Big East tournament and March Madness, that's going to help us quite a bit. He's been one of the better one-year Creighton players. I think he's up there with Ryan Hawkins. He's up there with a few more of those guys. So it's going to be super, super important that we find a way to figure out a way to replace Jemiah Neal. And then Ryan Kalkbrenner, Creighton's second best player of all time, at least best center of all time. I think he's second in all-time scoring. Potential 4-time player or defensive player of the year, maybe even a player of the year this year for the conference. He's been great. His number will be retired in Omaha. Nobody will ever wear the number 11 again. It's special. That's what it is what Ryan Kalkbrenner has been able to do over the past 5 years has been it's been special. And then even Sammy, he's having a little senior night himself, and he's done great things for the Creighton Blue Jay program. I remember even this year he was mic'd up for one of the games. That was super exciting. I feel like that game was Butler. They mic'd up Sammy for the Butler game. But that was one of my favorite moments of this year. It's just kind of fun seeing actual player interaction, regardless of if you're on the court a whole bunch or you're not. I felt like that was pretty awesome. And those are the guys that keep this program running. They really are. It's important for those guys to get their flowers, and seeing him leave will be it'll be a nice celebration for him, because I feel like he doesn't get a whole bunch of nods and applause. So it'll be really nice to see a celebration for somebody like him. Now, when we're taking a look at the future, this is interesting because this team can go many different ways this offseason. Creighton right now is in the hunt for a big-time overseas center. If they can get him, does Creighton stop recruiting a 5? Do they go get someone from the portal? They got to figure something out. I want to talk about some people that I think are going to play next year for the Blue Jays. We'll talk about it. We'll try to figure some stuff out here. I think Fedor stays. I feel like it's likely that he stays. This was kind of just like a throwaway year. Unfortunate. Wow, I've been chit-chatting for a while. Pop Isaacs, I feel like Isaacs is going to stay. I feel like Trout stays. I feel like Jason Green, Jackson McAndrew, and then we're going to bring in Hudson Greer. So what I've decided is Creighton needs either another ball handler or another wing for sure. Both would be perfect. Let's go get another guard who can really help cement that backcourt because this year it was a little rocky, only having Pop and Ashworth, and then technically only having Ashworth after that injury. Let's get another guard. Let's get another guard who can play. I love Ty Davis, but this year it's just been a little tough for him to kind of play in those bigger games. And so here's what I'm thinking. Let's go get another guard, and we'll run kind of a three-guard front with Fedor, Pop, XYZ. Then you got your four, who could be Trout, it could be Green, Miller, McAndrew. We'll figure it out. And then we got to get a big man. Blue Jays need to get a big man. Even if I feel like they get this recruit, this top talent overseas recruit, I feel like it's still going to be important that the Blue Jays get a veteran, at least somebody else to come in. If you're a freshman and you're going to be asked to play some big minutes, odds are you'll probably get starstruck a few times and have some early fouls, and can't have that. It's important that Creighton gets a center. It's important that Creighton can get a guard, get another wing. We need a Jemiah. And this team is going to be pretty darn good. I've never really thought Greg McDermott had a problem recruiting kids because the success at Creighton is just it's been there over the past decade at least. It's going to be important that Creighton figures out what they need and attacks it hard in the portal. I would like to see them also bring in some more high school kids. I feel like these kids can really develop. I think Jackson McAndrew is going to be one heck of a player for the Blue Jays. It's important that Creighton's able to stay on top of high school and figure out how they can win now too. I feel like Creighton can do a really good job doing that. I feel like they can do a lot of damage, especially this year in the transfer portal. I feel like Creighton will be a pretty eye-opening destination for some of those guys who want to really blossom into a stud. Greg McDermott just seems to do that with all of his dudes. That is all that I have here at the Birdcage. The Creighton Blue Jays play tonight against DePaul at 8 p.m. on Peacock. Tune in for that game. Fingers crossed. My schedule's been crazy busy. Hopefully, I can get back under the mic for another preview and recap for Xavier on Saturday. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you later.